Hello, welcome back to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. I'm excited to have Wayne Reuvers here with us today, founder and chief strategy officer at Live Retail. Going to be talking about creative, going to be talking about AI, going to be talking about pre-built brand creative at scale, and going in depth here with Wayne today, as well as investment opportunities around it. Wayne, excited for our discussion.
Hi, Jason. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Of course. And fascinated by your history, want to be able to bring the audience up to speed a little bit. So thought we could kick things off with your story.
Yep. Been very, very lucky. Grew up in South Africa and sold my first tech as stock market technical analysis programs to a bunch of banks and stockbrokers. Did very well as a young kid. And ended up building a back-end server technology for the internet before Microsoft's ASP existed. And one of the offshoots of that was the ClearPixel technology for tracking websites. We were the first that we know of on the planet to do it. It was used by every major site in those days, and very quickly we were the most requested server in South Africa and the 7th most requested server on the internet. That business got bought, and that sort of gave us a great insight into what people were looking at. So that was bought by Jupiter Media Metrics, the merger of Jupiter and Media Metrics. And, coming from South Africa, being small folks, it was a huge amount of money, and we thought we were incredibly lucky. We found out afterwards all our competitors all became billion-dollar companies. So you live and you learn, but that was good fun. So we actually learned, the concept. We basically invented this ClearPixel concept, and then we actually built an ad server as well that was acquired by the Omnicom group, and the rest is history. And so we turned LiveTechnology into a technology incubation company. And we spun off 6 different businesses, of which we've had 4 exits. We've been incredibly lucky. The exits include Omnicom acquiring businesses, Microsoft, eBay, as well as obviously Jupiter Media Metrics. So total shareholder value for a bunch of kids out of South Africa, we created shareholder value of $110 million, which is not bad. And it's allowed us to continue incubating cool companies. And the latest, and to me, it's always the latest is the most fun, but the most fun right now is Live Retail. And, my number one goal was to become an American, and moved here in 1999, and the rest is history. This is the greatest country on the planet and presents the biggest opportunities.
So fast. I got to tell the audience how impressive that is. Omnicom, one of the big 4 in advertising. My history, of course, is in ad tech, was referred to as one of the big 4 holding companies, with their own agencies. They're managing the top brands in the world. So to be able to sell the ad server, the Pixel company, the fact that you built, the first Pixel company, Facebook, Apple iOS, the big obstacle over the past couple years with the pixel tracking and some limitations for mobile app, off app tracking, all comes down to this mechanism of a pixel being able to tell who comes from an ad or any traffic source, who ends up converting, making a purchase, an investment, and being able to use that attribution to shape the next decisions for a marketer. It's really what it's all built on for media buying. So how did you guys, and I love the story of the first exits and in South Africa, being able to build things up with your friends, your group, your associates there. How did you conceive the concept of tracking through a pixel? How was it not done before? And what really made the difference for you in what you guys were doing and creating that everyone wanted to get a hold of, reflected by the acquisition from Omnicom?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the biggest player in the market for analyzing traffic to a website was Web Trends. And Web Trends had about 6 or 7 editors, all fairly well-funded companies. And they were doing what is called log file analysis. The biggest problem you had is if you visited the homepage of a website, then you went to the second page, and then you went back to the homepage. Because that first page was served out of your local cache, it never appeared in the log file. So you could never see how people actually really went along the pages. And what I discovered, and we wrote our own version called LSML, Live Server Markup Language, our own, everything was live. We wrote our own live markup language. And one of the things we discovered is that when we actually request an image, the browser actually requests the image and passes the image to the referrer, which the referrer is actually the web page that it's on. And we were like, wow. And the way things are cached locally, we said, imagine we could on the fly create this clear pixel that no one could see, that actually expired the second before you got it, which
Mm-hmm.
means now when the user went to the front page and then went to the second page and then went back again, the page came out of cache, but that clear pixel went and got requested again. And the
Mm-hmm.
product was called LiveStat, and we launched livestat.com, and we made it a free tool to tell people what they were doing. The beauty that we discovered is now we knew what sites people were going to, so we could now cross-monitor people as they went to other sites. And this became really, really valuable. And when we originally came to the US, Jupyter Media had this panel that, Media was doing before Jupyter and Media merged. They had this panel of people to see what people were doing online. And so by acquiring LiveStat, which became Live Analysis with all, the graphics and the optimization and the insights, they were now both sides of the equation. They had a panel of a group of people that they could now correlate, but they could see real traffic, and they made it available as their product in the market. And, it was, once again, it was more stumbling on something than, the way that we actually did it was once we figured it out. It was just, and by the way, just a little bit of useless information, but the techies that actually wrote the header, they misspelled referrer. So referrer is actually misspelled with a single R rather than, two R. So if you ever look at the header of any web page, the referrer has actually got a misspelling in it. But anyway, that was good fun. And then we started using the same thing for serving ads as well, to use the same tech, because now we could actually cross-match the user from another site to the site. And by the way, that's the tech that AdSense and all these other things are now built on. It's the same model. We just happen to be a little bit before any of those guys.
It's really shooting in the dark to run ads without having the pixel tracking. I was involved in what was referred to as the wild, wild west of mobile advertising, and had heard stories about these times for desktop, for pre forms of advertising, and how we were, really reserved in what we were able to track, what we were able to talk about. It was debilitating in many senses compared to other forms of advertising out there. So hearing about how it was used for organic and being able to tell where audiences were going, shape decisions accordingly, again, could speak directly to how important it is, especially with a scalable traffic source like advertising, to determine which audience, which ad creative, which funnel is really performing versus just guessing. There's that old adage of I know half my advertising's working, I just don't know what half. Pixels really, to a great degree, solve that. There's still some gray area, still some storytelling involved, but largely shape your decisions and how you improve a campaign. So the history is amazing.
And the other thing that also came out of it is because the pixel was almost independent of the site. So we now knew as LiveStat exactly what people were doing through the site. But what we also allowed is the companies, like we were working with Nedbank, one of the largest banks at that stage in South Africa, we allowed them that as they captured information on that user, they could actually aggregate that content with what someone was looking at on another site, or even filling in a form on another site. So they could allow retail, and retail wasn't like it is now, but they could allow retail to actually, so the consumer that was on the site, add information about their age and everything else, and they could correlate it to their target audience. So we started building the insights that became the ad serving. The ad serving is really, really easy. It's how you target the ads, and Google's done a phenomenal job. I mean, they are literally an absolute genius. And Facebook is okay, but Google has done an absolutely brilliant job of how they've managed to convince the world to install the Google Analytics Pixel. And I do actually mention to some retailers, the minute you're installing the Google Pixel to see the performance of your campaign, you're also giving your competitors in Google all the information about what people are doing in your site. So be aware of that. It's not the end of the world. There is so much data out there that a lot of the time there's almost too much data. So, but it's, the minute you install that pixel, then everyone, and the same goes for Meta. If you install the Meta pixel, the FB, the Instagrams, all that, they're able to see, your competitors are able to see what people are doing on your site as well. But right now we've moved into a world where privacy doesn't really exist, as whether people like it or not. And I personally don't like it, but it's where the world is. So
sure, especially in the wrong hands. For the use of advertising, as you said, it connects the dots. Correct. So instead of just knowing what your ad campaign is doing, what users are doing on your site, you're able to pull data from, in many cases, hundreds, thousands of different actions they've taken over time to be able to shape your targeting, So with Google and that big distinction between Meta, that they are getting that data from millions of sites. So finding the right user at the right time for the right ad placement and having these auctions take place to figure out which advertiser wins that advertising inventory, that placement. Used to use their programmatic platform, DoubleClick and other tools that were built upon it. So, instead of having to call hundreds of publishers or use different ad networks, it took that and created an ecosystem. And I know, what they're able to do with the Google Display Network, with their video ads with YouTube, I feel is really underrated and going to become more of what Meta is to small business advertisers in the next few years, because the technology, as you said, what they've done is just amazing on the ad serving level. Facebook has unique data. Their audience network, as you're mentioning, isn't quite what the Google Display Network's built out. But again, it's so profound to me that the underlying technology, I mean, you're correcting some of the spelling errors that exist from the origination.
Yeah, but you touch on a brilliant point, which is, in the case of Facebook, they own their own platform. In the case of Google, the Google Display Network, while they're the largest owner of text-based medium, and they're the largest owner of video-based medium, which is YouTube, they actually don't own the display. They actually are buying, in essence, they're selling it on behalf of the company. So while your actual cost per CPM that actually goes to the publisher is lower on Google, because of the swath of data they have, their responses are phenomenal. But with both those groups, with both Google and Meta, with a few clever little things, you can completely dial these responses up. And that's what we're finding. Later on, I'll give you an interesting little case study with one of the largest advertisers, who basically brought down their own servers just by changing the way they advertise slightly. So it's very, very interesting. There's still a lot of opportunity out there. It's still incredibly complicated. If you're a small business and you want to go buy some advertising on Meta, unless you employ an agency, you really can't. The small business goes in there and they're presented with all these forms and they don't know what to do. Their head's spinning, and some of these are filters of other groups and some of them are additions to other groups, and sometimes you choose something and it increases, and everything just becomes overwhelming, and then you've got to figure out the creative, and that's one of the issues. And Google has done a good job of supporting the advertising industry to build and manage these ads for them. But they're very powerful, and it's definitely more powerful than print. What you can do with $10, you couldn't do for print for $2,000.
It's really incredible, and that's why I like talking about the timeline a little bit. So, going from manual media buyers talking to publishers to ad networks, where now you're buying remnant inventory from high volumes of publishers, to exchanges, where now you're accessing the inventory that all the exchanges are trading, and Google being really the big player there. And in terms of sales, everything going through their Google Analytic platform, what they're selling and buying on the programmatic exchanges with their display network, and then leading into creative. Because when we see a campaign working, when we see a campaign not working, the big question is what's going to run next in terms of ad creative. And it becomes very difficult for even an in-house creative studio like we have at our agency, like many brands have, to keep up with the volume and be able to continue to do the research of what do our audiences want right now based on what competitors are doing today. The differences from variance, from A/B tests, from one creative to the next can be astronomical, and small lifts, decimals of a percentage to click-through rate, can make a world of difference in conversion rate and overall cost per acquisition of an investment, a purchase, a mobile app install, a lead generation form being completed. So I think that's what's so important about what you guys do at Live Retail. And it sounds like you were able to address pixels, then step into ad servers, see where that's going, see your technology used by some of the biggest brands. I mean, hearing about acquisitions from Microsoft and eBay and everything with Jupiter. And then now you're focusing on creative. Can you explain a bit, in addition to what I'm mentioning, why that became the focus? I mean, trying to pinpoint it, but I imagine that there's other factors, other things that are on a whiteboard that shaped that direction.
Yeah, so when we did one of the first deals with Omnicom, Omnicom bought 10% of our business for $25 million. So it was a $275 million post-money valuation, which was phenomenal. And that got us into the Omnicom network, and we started learning how these companies work. And it's phenomenal for us because it gave me access to all the CEOs of all the different Omnicom companies as well. But what I learned very quickly is the difference between the national brand advertising and the localized agency advertising. Is that the national brand, you've got the creative agencies that focus on one specific type of media, print, TV, digital, social media. And then you have the media buying agency, the PhDs, the OMGs, the OMDs, the Universal McCanns that actually do the buying. And there's a big chasm between the two. What you just mentioned is you can do A/B testing and tweak the creative, and then you can actually gear up more spend on the more performing one. Well, what you're doing is you're merging the creative and the media buying into one process, which is what it should be. So instead, what's happened with these massive agency groups is they've created all the creative folks, and then they've got the media buying, which actually becomes a financial structure. So in the case of the big companies like WPP and Omnicom and IPG, they actually trade the money. They actually collect the money from the clients and they pay out the media vendors, and they go to all these different events. There's a huge amount of money which they never want to relinquish. And so there is a disconnect between the creative agencies, and even in one group, you'll find that across one brand, multiple different agencies are working for a client across different stuff.
Yeah.
They don't really talk to each other that well. They pretend to, but they don't. It's just, the nature of the beast. Each one's trying to get more of the client's wallet. And so you have this constant circle. And so, we looked at that, and, we've got in some of our other businesses, Fortune 100 clients, and we look at the interactions between the agencies and the media, and it's always discombobulated. It's just this thing that never really runs smoothly. And so we actually said at the end of the day, it's one process. What you want to do is actually reach an audience to bring them into your store, bring them into your digital store, and get them to buy stuff. And it's that simple. There's nothing really complex about it. And along the way, you're going to touch them multiple different ways. You might touch them with email, you might touch them with social media ads, or digital display, or OTT on localized TV, Roku devices, whatever. You'll be touching them multiple different ways. And to have every different entity involved makes it almost impossible to make a decision. So we had all the creative rendering engine, no problem. And we said, well, all we need to do is build the equivalent of a trade desk, but make it specifically for the networks we care about. So we went out and we actually built a media buying platform, but we built it with a difference. What we did is we correlated all the audience targeting with Meta to specific audience targeting that is cross-sectioned with Google Display Network. So when you set up one set of audiences, you define the groups in our system, and it actually runs across Twitter, across Facebook, Instagram, Facebook, etc. And then we actually said, well, we've got the resizing engines that can actually create creative, and they can actually create video. And so we can actually now generate the correct ads for the correct medium size of the destination where they're going with the correct targeting. So we can close the gap so that one agency can actually manage the creative and the buying, and they can turn this dial if they want more money to flow to Facebook and less to Google Display, or more to LinkedIn and less. It's like a big dial as the agency sees what's working, what's not working. And then you can switch on and off certain targeting elements. You can say, okay, we actually discovered that, targeting people who are interested in personal finance is just too broad. A good example is we had one of our clients that launched a campaign, and they did audience lookalikes. And the thing that blew my mind is that Twitter found the most common segment of those lookalikes were dog owners, even though they weren't going for dog owners. This was the biggest joke ever. So they started targeting other dog owners. It just so happens that people that like investing also happen to own dogs. That doesn't mean you're trying to sell to dog owners. Okay. Dog owners happen to be a big portion of our population. But that's some of the mistakes that happens with those things. So what we also did as well is, in one of our other businesses, Live Platform, we found that onboarding a brand was a very tedious and costly process for the enterprise and for ourselves. And so and I'll give you a perfect example. If you want to bring like a bank on board, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to do all their planning, all their processes, and then you're going to ask for their brand guidelines. This is the standard set of brand rules on how creative has to conform to colors, to fonts, to relative sizes, to rules around positioning. For example, Bank of America doesn't allow their logo to be in the bottom right. There's a whole bunch of rules around these things, cool? So getting those brand guidelines, believe it or not, the company normally doesn't have them. They exist in multiple places with multiple agencies for multiple medium across multiple groups. So that takes 8 or 9 weeks to get. So we said, this is absolutely ridiculous. And we actually built a crawler to go visit the corporate website. And we use AI to actually analyze the CSS, and we look at the primary color of the website, the secondary color, the tertiary color, and the quaternary colors. And for each one of those colors, we put out the complementary color and the opposing color. And on the color wheel, the opposing color is just 180 degrees on the other side. And so we literally build the digital brand guidelines in under 45 seconds.
Wow.
And most of the time, it's better than you could wait the 9 weeks for the client to give it to you. So that's one of the first things we did. So we sent that out. The other thing we found is whenever marketing and a big corporate has to deal with IT, it's this headbutting. IT doesn't do well with marketing. And what we discovered is just something as simple as saying, hey, we need every location, every branch for your bank. That would take 3-4 weeks to do an extract of CSV. So we said, well, shit, they've got a location finder. So we sent our crawler with a little bit of AI that goes and interrogates their website and finds every location on their website. Searches by state, by city. We have a database of every single DMA, every single city, and we literally feed it and we come back out with a matter of minutes of every location. But then we take it a step further because we sold what was the Bing Business Portal to Microsoft. We know how Bing works and we know how Google Maps works. So we actually then aggregate content for every single store. We get the storefront image, we get a whole bunch of other images, we actually add things like hours of operation, closing times, everything else. We add that all that may not even be on the corporate website. So now we actually have more marketable data. As one of our clients actually said, you guys are like the Oracle, but for marketers. He said, you're a database built for marketers. He said, you've given me more information on our own entities in our group than IT or operations ever could. So we now have the brand guidelines. We have every single local and regional location. And then the third thing we go out is we send our AI crawler to look at what corporate is promoting. So if it's McDonald's, McDonald's has 41 menu items. We literally interrogate every one of those menu items. We pull all the images. Once again, the AI is clever enough to know, take all the headlines. We use the AI to convert the longer headlines to smaller headlines that can be used on slides within carousel ads and OTT video ads. So we make it super, super simple that you push one button and it takes everything that you're marketing as a brand, it takes every one of your stores and builds a unique ad for every single one that is completely editable at scale. And of course, you can test it. So you can take 2 ads for the same product, run them, do A/B testing.
Can you please start on that side of the house?
So
I'm getting background noise.
Just using clever ways of understanding the disconnects within these brands and how the creative process is different to the media process, which is different to the trafficking process. And we literally just merged it all into one. So we automate the creative production. We automate the targeting. So we take the targeting of each menu item. By the way, we also take the search engine optimized keywords from the website. We feed it into our AI to give us the targeting to use, the best targeting to use, which we then use to match to Meta's targeting elements, to the Google Display Network using keywords, and to Twitter's targeting elements. The ad targeting Twitter is a little bit tougher if you want to go that route. So we have to do a little bit of manual work there, but it doesn't take a lot of time. And then we have every single store, and we build a unique ad with unique targeting, geographic targeting, localized hyper targeting for every single combination. And then we send it to every store or every agent or every broker or every real estate office or every retail store or branch. And it's opened up a huge amount of opportunities that we had never even thought of. A good example is the FSI industry, which is the freestanding insert, the stuff that goes into newspapers. Kroger just announced that they're dumping theirs. Those we've always referred to that in industry as crack because they were addicted to it. The retailers could never get away from it, and they never wanted to because a lot of them made a lot of money from the manufacturers spending money to be in those FSIs. And so they were stuck in this FSI model all the time. Kroger just made a good decision to move, but the biggest advertiser on the planet is Procter & Gamble. And Procter & Gamble has over 186 brands. And those brands spend a lot of time advertising in these FSIs across all the Walmarts and the ShopRites and the Kmart, not Kmart anymore, but all of the retail stores. And so what we've now discovered is that the companies like the Lowe's and the Home Depots that actually have stores if they're smart enough to create a social media page for every one of their stores, the consumer is way more likely to follow Lowe's in their area than they will follow Lowe's corporate. So the aggregate of all the stores way outperforms the corporate brand. But the minute that happens, it opens up the FSI opportunity for these retailers. Right now, Amazon is eating their lunch on what's called MDF, marketing development funds. It's what Mr. Clean, one of the Procter & Gamble brands, would spend through Walmart to advertise. It's what Whirlpool will spend through Lowe's to advertise their washing machines. It's what DeWalt will spend through Home Depot and Lowe's. MDF is a huge amount of money. But the problem with that is it's always gone to FSIs mainly, or in-store collateral. And online, it almost always goes to Amazon, because those companies would pay to be ranked on Amazon search. But now suddenly, if Lowe's, and not all of them have done it yet, but if the Lowe's and the Home Depots and all these companies turn each one of their stores into their own entity within Facebook, and Facebook allows them to do it, they now will get the followers, and they now have the reach for the MDF brands to now spend through that new channel. They become the media owners, just like they were with the FSIs. Huge, huge opportunity. That's something that just blew our minds when we saw it. And it's been one of the areas for us that is fantastic. And yeah, so it's the national retailers that have all these stores. They can now leverage those stores as a huge competitive advantage against the Amazons of this world.
Proximity is power. I'm more likely to follow a business that's here in my neighborhood in Marina Del Rey than on a national level. I'm more likely to respond, to engage. Even if the creative says Marina Del Rey in it, I'm more likely to engage with it to begin with. And I could tell you the efficiency and overall effectiveness that you guys are able to provide with live retail is extremely real. You bring back so many memories of me calling on some of these agencies back in my mobile ad network days. And yes, in many cases, there was a strategy agency, a planning agency, a buying agency, maybe a separate creative agency, like you're saying. You think of these big multi-billion revenue a year companies as just the highest achievement of business, and everything is done perfectly, when, like you said, in many cases it slows down communications, approvals. Things that would be simple if you were talking to one person are 9 weeks, as you mentioned. So being able to do this in 45 seconds, where you're pulling the image from that actual location, you're creating ads, you're creating the specs. Early days of mobile and tablet ads, we were doing 32 different sets of ad specs for each mobile device. And I could tell you all the devices that were running in that period of time. And it was beyond a headache. It cost a lot of money, which we then would have to, get approved by all these places. So the fact that you're able to use the tool for efficiency, and then, like you said, effectiveness. And I love the example of dog owners. I'll give another one just in terms of site targeting, where we found real estate to be a great place to sell women's fashion, which we would have never included in a site list. But because we cast a wide enough net and let the AI kind of show us where we're getting the performance, let us know where the behavior is coming from, we're able to make perfect sense of it, of, hey, something that is higher than your price point, and then boom, impulse purchase, quick, get it right now. We did more of it. The cost per acquisition continued to improve. We sold more. So the effectiveness, being able to say, yes, because we have this community, we have this creative, we have this ad, what have you, for this location of this massive bank or retail store, this is how the lift in performance physically occurred, how we're scaling it, how it's showing up in revenue. So not just creative to make things that are pretty, but creative to produce stronger results.
Yep. You've hit the nail on the head. An interesting thing talking about just the local ad. So the minute we add the name of the city, so we've got a rule that the opening slide of every carousel ad, whether it's a video, a mixed media, so it's images and video, or just images, or even, and we always tell our clients, never go for a single image. You always want interaction. So you want carousels. So they Google discovery ads. But the first image has to mention the name of the city. And the reason we say that is we see a 3 to 4 times lift when you mention the city. When a person sees the name of a town that is their town where they work or live, their response rate goes through the roof. And I'll give you a good example of this. So Unilever was running a campaign for Axe deodorant, one of the brands they own, and they were building a database of males that enjoy video gaming that are between 18 and 35, a fairly expensive demographic. And when you're buying nationally, you're competing against Nike, against Blizzard, against every single one of these guys with other big budgets. And Unilever has a big budget. And what was really interesting is that they were running the campaign and was doing well, and it was win a PlayStation 5. So the key was it was talking about Axe deodorant in the concept of winning a PlayStation 5, and then you would register to win the PlayStation 5, and then you were entered and you could win the PlayStation 5. And they were trying to build a bunch of people, and they were running social media and display ads. And so we know some of the folks at Universal McCann, and they reached out to us and they said, hey, can we actually do something? We've got some MDF funds, which is money that needs to be spent through ShopRite. So they took 236 strip malls that had ShopRites in them, and they tweaked the ads, exact same ads they were running, no difference, except the front part of the ad now changed, win a PlayStation 5 with an image of the shopping center that the ShopRite was in and the name of the city. And they could use money that didn't even come from the same budget. Ended up being 4% of their total budget. But they ran these ads with a geographic target 25 miles around each one of these cities. And it had nothing to do with the cities or towns. The first thing that happened is the cost of the media was about 46% less because you had no one bidding against you. So when you're buying males between 18 and 35 who enjoy video gaming and live 25 miles around the city, there's no competition. Now, the nationals are buying, but there's enough inventory to sell. So Facebook is happy to sell you this audience at a much cheaper price than the national audience. And so they were buying that at a steep discount without anyone realizing. And the second thing that happened is by having the name of the city in it, the response rate went through the roof. In 70 hours, they got more registrations on spending just 4% of their total budget than the entire 96% put together, and their registration servers crashed under the load. Everyone in our company and the client and the agency was freaking out. Oh, the registration servers. They're not our registration servers. They were Unilever's registration servers. The IT guys couldn't handle the volume. For me, it was one of the best things ever. It was like, it shows you how good it was. And so it's amazing. And that's moved a lot more money into this model. There's some international universities that have moved almost 100% of their budget into targeting regional areas. They target people who attended schools that have other people that went to their universities. So it's a very clever way of doing it. So you can target the creative and you can mention the school and target the people. So being able to target something that is close to people, that has an emotional tie. Advertising is always about emotion, attention, interest, desire, action. And in the case of seeing an ad that has the name of something that is close to you, your school, the university you attended, your sports team, the favorite place you went on vacation, or the city where you live and work, it's a no-brainer. And so the response rate goes through. The cost of media is way, way less. That means we can always do with what we do. We guarantee our clients that if they don't outperform their current media by at least 60%, they don't pay our fees. And it's a no-brainer for us. It's like we've never had to ever refund any money. And it's because it's a very easy thing to do. We're immediately getting the cost of media is substantially 30 to 40% less, sometimes even 50% less. So we're knocking the ball out the park. In other words, we're double performing. If you're paying half, you're 100% up. So getting to those numbers is a no-brainer. But yeah, it's interesting.
Bold offer. It's a bold offer and shows the effectiveness right there. And I want to speak to the founders who are listening in and probably taking notes and thinking, what's the value? How can they apply this to their own model? I mean, you're talking about outstanding levels of performance in comparison to industry averages, maybe some of the metrics that they're seeing on their own campaigns. What could they test out towards their own growth? Perhaps using live retail or, even just in general, what are some tactics that you've seen work that warrant a test? Marketing is a series of tests. It's not black and white. It's not going to work for every brand, but what would make sense for them to apply? You've mentioned, putting a name of a landmark, a team, their neighborhood, something in there, I could tell you I definitely respond more if there was the LA Dodgers put in there. I could attest to this. And seeing images of my neighborhood and things nearby, I've signed up for things I could tell you directly. But what are some tests that you could recommend for any founders who are listening in?
So if they're trying to grow their business, I always say that there's really 4 numbers that you care about in growing any business. And it depends what the goal of your business is. So in a traditional business where it's about revenue, there's the 2 most important numbers always are money in versus money out. Because money in versus money out tells you everything about your business, how long you're going to survive, if your money in is more than your money out. And then the second 2 numbers are the value of your business. And those are the change in money in and the change in money out. In other words, the rate at which the money in is growing versus the rate at which the money out is growing. If your money out is growing faster, then your money in, you're bankrupt. If your money in is growing faster, then you know how long your life is before you die. And VCs care about that as well. But at the end of the day, depending on what the business's goal is, and our business, interestingly enough, in live retail is 200,000 users, because at 200,000 users, it's a fairly lucrative market. And so we're just rushing for 200,000 users. So we actually focus on total number of users and total number of brands. And from that, we look at the growth rate of users and we look at the growth rate of brands. And that allows us to correlate all the information around those brands and users. And we then focus our marketing around that. And so we actually found that when we have one brand that onboards, we target all the competitive brands by mentioning that brand's name. So even if we win, a small massage envy, we will target every one of the other massage franchise brands. If we win a DIY retail group, we will run ads welcoming them on board and targeting all the other DIY groups and targeting them through, we find Twitter works really well for these and the Google Display Network to a certain extent. Facebook sometimes depends on whether you're targeting marketing or owners. And so being able to target it. So for founders, the first thing I would do is say, how can you actually define your particular audience, your particular user, your particular buyer completely different? And what is the thing that emotionally ties them to something? Is it, if your product is travel, then you need to know where they've been. And in fact, as an example, I bought an air charter business just as a sideline. And what we did is we looked at every single destination in the Bahamas where these guys go. And we looked at every single city that people that have visited those places in the Bahamas come from. And we built a matrix of every combination. And we targeted only people from, for example, West Palm who had been to Green Turtle. And the ads included Green Turtle and pictures of Green Turtle. And our response rate is the highest response rate I've ever seen. And it just absolutely exploded. That was very interesting. That was just, as I said, it's just a business. I needed to get rid of some capital gains. So that was the reason for buying a little small airline. But it's a really, really interesting thing that came out of that. And what that also did for us that was interesting, it actually helped us understand the concept of the travel industry. It turns out that there's a huge amount of marketing between what's called flight pairs. So, for example, it's from Chicago to Lima. And there's airlines that will pay for that particular exposure. Well, we can now target people who are living in Chicago and have been to Lima with ads that talk about Lima and the airline targeted. So because we've got this concept called a creative matrix, we can build it. So any founders, and by the way, you can use live retail at no cost. Like literally, you can build it all. You can build your campaigns. It's all free. The only time we charge, we take 10% of the media you spend, but we guarantee a 60% lift. So it's a no-brainer. So if you feel you don't get the lift, tell us. We won't, no questions asked. For the 10%, to be honest, someone that's spending $1,000, we make $100. Doesn't really matter. But it's all about the thousands of companies. But so if you literally define and you say, hey, for my startup, I'm writing a game. Say, if the founder's writing a game and it's a game that's, boating. So you want to target people with an interest in a boat and you want to target people that are these age. You can actually create these matrices of targeting audiences and messages and create every combination. And it's the best way to test. Because think about this matrix of every single ad combination and every single targeting combination. And now you start seeing certain of them lift. So out of all of these, so you might have, say, 5 targeting audiences with creative associated with them, by another 5 targeting audiences associated creative, you've got 25 ads built